Well, everyone, good morning. Happy Saturday. Thank you for being here. My name's Jill Keys. I'm a student at Colorado State University Global going for my bachelor's in management information systems. And I have only really done Power BI for a year, but what I'm going to show today is all the things I wish I knew in a step-by-step process for being a beginner in Power BI. So we're going to learn how to use Power BI to answer real business questions. And I want to emphasize again that this workshop's for beginners. You don't need experience in business intelligence software, and you definitely don't need programming experience. However, if you have Power BI experience, you're also welcome to be here. So just know we'll be doing a Q&A at the end of this workshop. So feel free to post your questions in the chat. Feel free to write down your questions if you have anything you want to ask at the end. I have an updated Excel spreadsheet I'm using for this workshop and a dashboard template, which I sent to Sean. If anybody wants the updated version of it, because we did provide links when everybody was registering on the form, but if you want the updated version, it's just formatted differently. Feel free to ask Sean. You can ask that in the chat and we can email it over. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you this beautiful dashboard that I built. Okay, so this is the financials report 2014. This is a Excel spreadsheet Microsoft provided, but I edited it so I could add my own rows of columns and work with more data. So we're going to be learning how to build a financials report for a manufacturing company. So we have a line chart over here. We have KPI cards up here standing for key performance indicators. And then over here, we have what are called our slicers, where you can click and the report's going to move dynamically along with it. We can compare customer segments along with all that. So today, that is what we are going to be deep diving into today. Power BI is so powerful because what I got to do is take raw data and turn it into business data-driven decisions, just like what's presented in this beautiful dashboard over here. So today, I kind of want everybody to keep in mind that Power BI is kind of like building a house. Power Query is your foundation, you're preparing the land, you're clearing out debris, making sure the ground is level, because if you build anything and the foundation is bad, the whole house is just shaky. The data modeling process, which we will learn as step 2, is the framing and the structure, which is over here. The walls, the beams, how the rooms connect to each other, a well-structured house makes sense to walk through.
Carrie, I think I let you in. Yeah, there you go.
Are we good?
Yeah.
All right. What I was saying was that the data modeling is kind of like framing and structure of a house. So a poorly structured one has hallways that lead to nowhere and the doors just open up into walls. So we will also be using DAX, which is what powered a lot of the filtering and what made this report so dynamic. DAX is kind of like your electricity and plumbing. The systems run behind the walls, which makes the house functional. You don't see them, but if you flip the switch, the lights turn on. The dashboard is the interior design. So what I'm showing right here is all of the painting, the decor, the layout. It's what people actually see and interact with first. And just like building a house, the order matters. You can't hang a painting before the wall is up, and you can't wire the electricity before the frame is built. So that's why we are going to go into Power Query first, then modeling, then DAX, then visualizations. So by the end of this session, you'll understand how Power BI can help businesses move from data to insights. So we are going to answer these 3 key questions today. Which customers are generating the most profit? How do sales and profit trend over time? Which segments of the business are performing best? Instead of just building visuals, we are going to think like analysts. Every chart we create should answer a question. So enough of the talking, we're going to get started. I'm going to go right here. This is what you see when you first open up Power BI Desktop. I'm going to click blank report right here. It'll be pulling up. And here we go. Now we have a blank slate to work with. So before we dive into Power Query, let's get familiar with the interface so we know where everything lives. On the left side, I want today to focus on these 3 icons up here. We're right now in the report view where there is nothing. Originally, there were a lot of line charts and graphs happening, what I showed previously. This is where you build your visuals and dashboards. You'll spend most of the time here once your data is ready. Over here, we don't have anything in here yet, but this is the table view. You'll be able to see your data in a spreadsheet-like format, kind of like Excel. It's useful for checking your columns, verifying your data types, and formatting your measures. And then over here is going to be the model view. This is where you will see how your tables connect to one another. We'll use this when we build what is called our star schema relationships, which we will dive into a little bit later. Now back to the visualizations pane. Here on the right is kind of your bread and butter for how all this works. You have your build, you have your formatting right here, and then once we load our data, you will be able to see it all in this kind of box right here. And so down here, these are the pages. We're only going to be doing one page today, but you can add more pages if you're wanting to build a full-blown report of showing an even more in-depth analysis. So that is the lay of the land we have right now. Report view for building up here. We have the table view right here for inspecting and the model view for relationships. So now that we kind of know what the Power BI desktop interface is, we are going to click import data from Excel right here. And we are going to use this financial sample data right here. I'm going to open it up. And now we are in our navigator. So we can see our 5 tables right here that come from the Excel file. So we have our financials, we have the customer segments, we have our products, geography, and our dates. So what I'm going to do is check all of this. We need all of this data today. And we can click load because the data is clean when I prepared it, but we're going to go into transform data because I at least want to show a few things that come along with Power Query Editor and the things that you are going to probably be doing the most here. So Power Query is the data preparation layer in Power BI. It's where you connect your data and get everything cleaned up before it hits the data model phase. So think of it as kind of like kitchen prep before cooking. You're washing, chopping, and measuring your ingredients here so that when it's time to build your dashboard, everything's ready to go. Before we dive more into this, I want to point out 2 things. Number one, it's non-destructive. When you have your data in Power Query Editor, you are not going to ruin the data from the original Excel file that we just pulled up. Every step is recorded, so your cleanup is repeatable on refresh, and you can always back out of something you just changed in here. Number 2 is this is called the ETL engine of Power BI. ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. So we just extracted our data from where it lived in Excel. We're transforming it right now, cleaning and reshaping it. So fixing types, removing columns, filtering rows. And then when we're done with all that, we're going to push this close and apply button up here where it's all going to load. So we're going to go ahead and look at the interface just a little bit in Power Query Editor, and then we'll get really hands-on with what everything is. On the left-hand side, this is your queries list. So all 5 tables from Excel are loaded into here. You can click at them, look at them one at a time. And then in the center right here, this is called the data preview. So you can look at the data that you're working with. And on the right-hand side, this is really important because when you start removing stuff and editing things, this is your applied steps pane where everything's kind of like a log here recorded. So today we are going to talk about 3 common transformations: removing columns, changing data types, and filtering rows. So like I said, our data is already pretty cleaned up here, but I'm just going to go into some of those common things that you'll tend to do in a project. So number 1 is we're going to remove our columns, which is kind of like cleaning your counter space before cooking. If you're making pasta, you don't need a waffle iron out. So we are going to right-click the manufacturing price right here, and then we are going to click remove. So let's say we did not need that in our data. We're just removing clutter. So if your report doesn't use a column, you typically get rid of it so your model stays lean. Now it went all the way over here in the removed columns section. We are going to right-click this right here, and we're going to rename because a lot of times there can be a lot of applied steps if you're working with messy data. So or just things that are in there that you will not need in your report. And kind of like how programmers will leave comments or format their code a certain way for people to read, that's kind of like this applied steps thing right over here is we want to give it a name because otherwise it's just going to be remove column 1, 2, etc. And we're going to be like, which was which? So we're just going to say removed manufacturing manufacturing price. And now we have that removed. So number 2 is going to be changing data types. So with these columns on the left-hand side, you're going to see these symbols, and these represent what type of data type these are. As you practice with Power BI, you'll be able to just easily look at these and memorize, oh, that's text, oh, that's decimal. It's pretty straightforward with it. But if I click like here on the product, I can see that this is like text. So the icons are up here, right there. So let's say we want to change the data type. Let's say for the units sold, I do not want decimal places. There's a decimal over here. There's a decimal over here. I just want this to be a whole number. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to click this whole number little button right there. We can see change type 1 over here. Again, because we're working with applied steps, I want to rename this, and I am just going to say units sold changed data type. I like to try to be as descriptive as possible when I'm renaming my applied steps, so there's as minimal guessing as what means what when I'm trying to review what I cleaned up. So changing data types, when it comes to this being kind of the kitchen prep, your Power Query, it's kind of like making sure your ingredients are in the right form. Like if a recipe calls for crushed garlic, but you toss in whole cloves, it's technically still garlic, but it won't work the way the recipe expects. This is the same thing with Power BI. If Power BI thinks, let's say your sales column is text instead of a number, so later when you're using Power BI's language DAX, it just won't do the math because it thinks it's text instead of a number. And then you're going to get really confused and not understand why it's not working. So just so you know, Power Query is pretty intuitive with the data types. As you can see, it knows that our product and country is text and what's decimals, whole numbers, but it's always good to click on these queries and just double check briefly so that there's no confusion later on. So number 3 is we are going to be filtering rows. It's like sorting through your produce and tossing out what you don't need. You're not going to put a bruised apple in your apple pie. So what we're going to do is click this drop down on the country right here. Let's say we do not want Canada filtering into our report later. We don't need that. This kind of helps a lot with cleaning up storage. If you don't need something, it'll make the reports run faster as storage and memory is cleaned up. So now it went over here to filtered rows. I'm going to rename this to filtered out Canada. And there we go. So we just learned how to navigate through Power Query Editor, how to remove columns, change data types, and filter through rows. So what you can see over here are these X's. And when you click these X's, it can all come right back. So no worries if you did something and you were like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. You can bring it right back. My friend Belinda, I wanted to ask you, is there anything you would like to add in about Power Query Editor whatsoever?
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, data modeling, this is part of our data modeling and it's critical. And just as you mentioned, Jill, on removing columns and removing rows, our goal is to make our data as small as possible so it will perform better. So I have a theory called when in doubt, throw it out. So get rid of it if you're not sure if you need it. If people need it, you only have to come back in and edit the steps that you just showed. And the other thing I wanted to show, if you click on the dim date table, okay, first of all, bravo for having a date table. If you have a date anywhere in your system, you should have a date table. And the date table should include every day of the year. And we really want to try on our dates to only show date and not date time. Because one of the other things we want to do for performance reasons is have the each column, the cardinality as low as possible. Cardinality basically just means the unique value of a field. So if you need a timetable, create a timetable too. Because if you have a date table that has date and time in it for every second available in the date, 1 year alone is going to be over 31.5 million rows. And that is going to blow up on you after you have 10 years or so. So those are the only two things I would add. Great overview on that. So, bravo.
Thank you very much, Belinda. I appreciate your assistance and help. So now that we are done with the Power Query Editor, we're going to click Close and Apply up here on the top left, and our data is going to be loading into our report. And there we go. Now we can see over here that blank kind of area is now filled up with our data. You can see all our tables over here. We have the table view right over here loading in. We can see everything. And then over here is our model view. So this is where we are going to be jumping into section number 2, which is going to be data modeling. So now that our data is loaded, we need to organize how tables relate to each other, which is data modeling. And you'll see all 5 tables loaded into here. You can see the financials table right here in the middle, and then everything else is around it. We can see that Power BI automatically loaded 3 what is called relationships, what these lines are. But the dim date does not have a relationship, which don't worry, we are going to go ahead and get into that a bit later on how to create a relationship. So in the center, you can see this is the fact financials, which is the fact table. So a fact table stores the measurable numeric data, the things you want to sum, count, or average. It records every single transaction event that occurred with values like sales, profit, cost of goods sold, units sold. So every row represents something that has happened. Fact tables, try to see them as they're like very tall and narrow with many rows, and they're mostly numbers. So surrounding it are called the dimension tables. So we have dim representing for dimension. You'll see that often as the shortened word when you're working with data modeling. We have dim geography, dim segment, dim date, and dim product. So these are kind of like the descriptive categorical data points. The labels you filter by or group by. So what they do is they answer the who, what, where, and when about each transaction in this fact table. So dimension tables are pretty short, as we saw in here. When we look in like all of these, like for example, the dim product, we have like 6 rows, and in this fact financials, we have so many rows, 700. So that's kind of the key indicator to understanding, kind of identifying what's the fact table, what's the dimension table. The fact table has all the events. The dimension tables have all the categories and descriptions kind of it. The star schema, this is called a star schema. So in the center is the fact table, and all around it is the dimensions. The dimensions are kind of like the points of the star. The fact table is the core center of the star. It's important to know what a star schema is because this is the most common and recommended pattern for Power BI in a lot of data analytics languages or softwares because it's simple, fast, it makes your DAX and filtering work correctly. It's also important to mention that, you know, it is the industry standard. So if somebody is reading your data model and trying to help, they'll be able to look at it and easily see the middle is the fact and everything surrounding it are the dimensions. So in the star schema in the middle is holds what happens, and all the points of the star give it context. So now we're going to go into what relationships are. These are one-to-many relationships. We can see because there is a 1 on the product side right here, the arrow's going this way, and you can see this asterisk, this little star going to the product as well over here, and this is for all 3 of these tables. So it's a good rule of thumb to know that stars, these little asterisks, are always going to be on the fact table, not the dimension table, because there are so many transactions happening here, and there's one description for all those transactions. So one product, like for example, we have a product called Paseo in the dim product. It maps to dozens of Paseo transactions over here in the fact table. We have one country in Canada over here, but there are so many transactions that relate to Canada over here. So why this is important is because relationships control how filtering works in Power BI. The filter flows from the one side, the dimension, and then it goes to the many side and the fact. Sometimes you'll see Power BI auto-generating instead of a one-to-many and many-to-one. That is also completely fine. Really what you want to see is to make sure that there is a 1 by the dimension table, and then there's a many by the fact. There are a lot of other relationships out there, but we are focusing on one to many because that is the most common one. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a relationship between the date table and the fact table. Power BI, as I said, auto-detected most of our relationships, but let's create one manually so you can see how it works. So we are going to drag the date all over to this date column right here in the fact table. And we can see the cardinality automatically as a one to many. And we want to save that. That is correct. So now when we are filtering later, like when we are doing our slicers and the report is moving dynamically, it is going to filter through and give us exactly what we want when we do our in-depth analysis on our visualizations. So now that our relationships are built, I just want to talk about one thing, which is hiding columns. And I want to talk about why this is important. Hiding columns prevents you from accidentally later on dragging and dropping the wrong field into a visual when you're in a report view. So if we go into this report view right here, for example, let's look at our fact table. We can see all of these, but what I want to really hide are the ones that were dragged from the dimension table to connect to the fact table, like the date, the product, the segment, the country. Because later on, when I build my visualizations, if I accidentally drag a column from the fact table instead of a dimension table, the data is going to be inaccurate because there are so many transactions happening here. In fact, Power BI is only going to know what it's automated to do and what you tell it to do. So we are going to go over back here in the model view, and we are going to click product. When we click this, you can see with the relationship, it's highlighted over here. That's so we know, like, okay, this product comes from over here of this describing it. We are going to hide it in the report view.
Jill,
We are going to hide the country.
if I may, I'm so proud you're showing people how to hide it because that it could confuse people. I do a little cheat factor. If you click on collapse at the bottom of each of those tables, the only thing you're going to see are the fields where relationships create, and then you can know automatically. But bravo to you for doing that, because there's nothing that's going to be more confusing to some of your self-service report users to have two country fields and not know which one to select.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for showing me that. I really appreciate that. There's one thing that I really love about Power BI is sometimes it can feel like, what am I doing? But when you look at it kind of from like a bird's eye view perspective, it's not really as much of a maze as you think it is, because there's so many different ways to access different buttons, kind of like what we showed here, where you can expand and collapse, or you can like hover over here to see. You're never really going to get lost in Power BI. And if you are lost, that's okay. That's totally okay. Is there anything else you want to add, Belinda, before we move on to our DAX section?
No, I think you did a brilliant job on talking about the star schema.
Thank you very much. So just to wrap up the data model part, star schema organizes your data with a central fact table surrounded by dimension tables. One-to-many relationships connects them with filters flowing from dimensions to the fact. And this is a clean structure which makes everything downstream, DAX, slicers, visuals work correctly, and it's going to make your life a lot easier. So now we're going to move on to Power BI's language, DAX. Now that our data is connected and our model is set up, we are going to create custom calculations, which is where DAX comes in. DAX stands for data analysis expressions. It's the formula language inside Power BI, and without it, Power BI can only do very basic default mathematical aggregations like simple sums, counts. With DAX, you can build any calculation to your business needs. Before we go into building what are called calculated measures, I do want to emphasize that DAX is kind of a rabbit hole. I am going to show you today how do you format your DAX code, how the structure of DAX works, and in your own time, maybe I can do a workshop later on in the future of a deep dive into DAX, but We're not going to think too much about that right now. We're just going to jump in. You can click here, you can click new measure, or you can right click right here and have a new measure. Oftentimes you'll see DAX measures either in their own table or in the fact table. Oftentimes you'll see that when you look at data models. So right here, we're going to click new measure, and we are going to build our very first DAX measure. Before we do this, there's a handy dandy little trick I like to do here. If you hold control and then you zoom in and out, you can adjust the size of your little text box right here. So if how it is on default is too small to read, you can enlarge it. So we are going to create our total sales measure, our very first one. So we are going to use the aggregation sum, and then we're going to do parentheses, and then we're going to use an apostrophe to go inside of the fact financials table. I'm going to click enter because DAX is so nice. It just pops up what it thinks you may want as an option. And then I'm going to do my non-curly brackets, and we are going to summarize all the sales in here. I'm going to click here. I'm going to go into the parentheses and enter. Now we just created our very first DAX measure. Let's put this in action. If I go into the build section right here and I grab a card, I'm going to drag it right over here. I can see this little calculator means that a measure was created. So that's how we can know this is a DAX measure. So I'm going to click the check mark here, and there we go. We have our total sales pulled up right here. So the sum aggregation we used added up all the transactions from sales to show the total sales that were made. So we're going to go back into our model view and make our second measure, which is going to be total profit. So we labeled our measure, equal sign after that, that's where the DAX comes into play. We're going to do the sum aggregator again, parentheses, I'm going to tell DAX to go inside my fact financials table again, and what I want is the profit. So I'm going to say, please let me see all of the profit. There we go. So I'm going to grab a card right here. Again, little calculator right there. That's our measure. Boom, there we go. Total profit right there. Now we're going to do one more DAX measure before I move on to all the fun data visualizations, which is where you're going to see a lot of the DAX filtering happening, where it's going to help with the report move dynamically when it comes to our slicers. So we are going to right click here. We're going to do a new measure, and we're going to do profit margin percent. So instead of sum this time, we are going to divide. And this is really cool. You don't have to just use columns from your tables to do the math in DAX. You can also work with measures. So we are going to work with our total profit and total sales measure. So with a non-curly bracket, I'm going to pull up my total profit, and then I'm going to add a comma, and then it says denominator right here. So I'm going to add a space, and I'm going to add the denominator I want, which is total sales. Now, after that, we can put in an alternate result. And what's so great about this is if you're doing the division and an error pops up, instead of an error, it'll show 0. So it'll be a lot cleaner. So there we go. Now, if we come all the way over here, we grab a card, and we have our profit margin percent. Now it's a decimal right now because it's formatted this way. Belinda will probably know a quicker way to get into turning this into a percentage. But what I do is I go to the table view right here. I make sure my profit margin is selected, and I'm under the measure tools in the ribbon. I want to format this to be a percentage. And when I come right back to the report, there it is. Another cool thing you can do is you can also add or remove decimal places. My favorite way to do this is to right click with my mouse, and I like to click right here. Now we only have one number showing up after the decimal. So we just went into building our very first DAX measures. We learned how to format measures when we pull them up in a visual. And now we are going to move on to the visualization stage. Belinda, is there anything you want to add on to the DAX portion of this workshop?
I just want to stress the reason for DAX, and also what I would do for the total profit and the total sales is I would go in and hide the sales and the profit fields that you formatted, so it doesn't again look like we have duplicates of that. But the reason why we use them, you can pull a field out into a visual, and you can control how you want it to aggregate, but that's called an implicit measure. And that actually takes longer to process than a measure. So not only is DAX powerful for measures that you can't nor get because they're more complex, but it also just a straight up sum rather than using this DAX field total sales rather than using the field total sales, it's going to perform significantly faster. So anything that you're going to automatically aggregate, it is better to create a DAX field. It does not add any data. It only adds a formula. It is better to create the DAX function for it and then hide the original version because it will perform better. And then it's that's just the biggest reason that you want to do that. So excellent job on doing that. You could also, from the data pane, wherever you are, hide fields. So in the report view, you could do that as well. It just eliminates a lot of confusion for users. So if you look on that list, on that drop down about halfway down, right where you were on the ellipsis, click on the
Over
ellipse.
here?
No, the three dots again. Yeah. Click on hide halfway down. There you go. And that
There
does
we
the same
go.
thing. Yep. You could also show hidden fields if you want to use one of them on a report for whatever reason. But that is one reason you'd want to do it. And then AI is another reason. AI would get confused seeing two fields at the same time. So it'll ignore the hidden fields unless you explicitly tell it not to. Okay.
All
Yeah,
right.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful DAX. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Belinda, for your input. I really appreciate it. All right, so now we are going to go into the visualization section, which is the really fun part. Now, before we start building, Bill, let's talk about why we're doing this. I want everybody to kind of keep in mind a dashboard is not just a collection of charts, which is kind of the mindset I had when I first started using Power BI. It's a tool for telling your company's story with data. Every visual should serve a purpose, answering a business question, surfacing a trend, or highlighting an opportunity. When it's done well, a dashboard lets decision makers skip the whole spreadsheet and go straight to the insights. So I was on a podcast episode with Belinda for Weekend Power Platform, and Belinda did make the point it's better to have one visualization that tells a great story rather than so many crammed together. And of course, typically you're going to do more visualizations than that, but more is not always better. Now, what's provided with this workshop is I did add a background template. If we right click here and do format canvas, we can go to browse image, and this is the image that was provided when signing up for the workshop. If you do not have it, you can always email Sean, and the YouTube video will have it in the description. We're going to take the transparency all the way down to 0. And now we have a very beautiful layout of kind of how at least I would format a lot of this. Everything is kind of different depending on the business that you are working with. For example, I like removing that number right there at the profit margin percent because that's what I just typically encounter most. That's preference, but some people may say, no, we want to see that extra thing, and that's totally fine. So what I kind of like to do when I'm building out my visualizations is there is something that I learned called the 330-300-second rule. So this is a framework for thinking about a dashboard design with your audience in mind. In this case, when it's financials, I'm kind of trying to think in the mind of a CFO. What does the CFO want to see? In 3 seconds, the CFO wants to grasp the big picture, which are these numbers up here. I want to see where the sales profit's going, what our profit margin percent is. So that's why the key cards are at the top here. In 30 seconds, the viewer should be able to analyze key trends and breakdowns. We'll have a line chart provided right here. I pull up my line chart. There it is. And we are going to want to see how sales and profit is trending over time by year and quarter. And we're going to go ahead and grab the x-axis, and we are going to go into our date table. See, this is kind of the beautiful part when we hide things. If we go here on accidents, because we use this fact table a lot, we are not going to see the date, kind of like what we were hiding earlier in the data model and what you can do here when you right click over there. But what we're going to do is pop up the year and quarter, and then I want my y-axis to show the total profits and the total sales. And so what I want to do is now let me just explain this. In my education system, I've learned that the less clutter, the better. If the labels are pretty intuitive of what's going on, like that this is the year and quarter, and that this is showing like the total profit and total sales, feel free to remove it to reduce clutter. That's what I've learned. I'm an aspiring software consultant, so I haven't really worked with a client yet, but at least in my experience in the education system, that's what we kind of are taught to kind of learn. Belinda, do you have any experience with in the Power BI work field, kind of what clients tend to prefer that you typically run across? I'm curious to know.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. When you have that much noise on the page, it distracts from the truth. And you want to be able
Mm,
to consume information as quickly as possible to make your reports usable. If the end user has to search for data, then they're not going to use the report. And no matter how beautifully you modeled your data and how beautiful your report is, it's garbage if nobody's using it. So we want to think about the user. So we want it to be quick and easy to access. And on top of that, you do have a tooltip that you could set up for
yep,
the more information.
yep, that's correct. Today we're not going to go into tooltips, but the beauty of tooltips is when you drag over here, you can kind of see how the total profit and the total sales, like kind of like what those numbers are. But you can make customized tooltips if you go into another page, and that's kind of something that we'll tackle another time. But the tooltips are a very wonderful part of this because it's kind of like part of that in-depth analysis of I want to see like the exact data points in a very clean way possible. Kind of like what Belinda was saying, you want to reduce as much clutter as you can so that the report's very easy to digest. So you can see that our access is formatted instead of like by year. Usually what Power BI will do is they will kind of format it by alphabetical order. But what we're going to do is we're going to sort the access instead of by total profit. We want to sort it by year and quarter. And then we are going to sort it by ascending because now it's going from 2014 to 2013. Everybody, at least in the United States and a lot of countries, we read from left to right. So we're going to do sort by ascending, and there we go. So we are going to also rename, sorry, 1 second. No, there we go. We're going to click up here and we're going to rename this because I kind of really want the name to be a little bit shorter. So what I'm going to do is name this sales and profit trend by quarter and year is what we'll do. Actually, a quarter and year. There we go. So now we have our line chart formatted right up here. And now that we have this, this is kind of like the meat between the two pieces of bread. We're going to go now into building a clustered bar chart so that we can see which customer segments are generating the most sales, the most profits for this manufacturing company. So what I'm going to do right up here is grab my clustered bar chart. And what I'm going to do is come into here on my y-axis. I'm going to go to the dimension segment right here. I'm going to click segment. And then when we go to the fact financials, the x-axis is going to be total sales right here. Hang on 1 second. total sales. There we go. And kind of like what we were talking about earlier, reducing as much clutter as possible, it's kind of hard to see, but a lot of these grid lines will pop up, which can be a little distracting. So when we're in our format pane right here, to remove those grid lines, we are going to click that to be off. I am going to remove this segment title because we can see the segments pretty visibly right there. And we have our title total sales by segment, which to be just a little bit more descriptive, I'm just going to add in customer segment right here. Hang on. To our format, title, total sales by customer segment. And there we go. So our next visual we're going to do is our table visual. And just so you know, when we're done with all this and we add our slicers, our text box up here, we finish up with the table, we will remove the background image because as you can see, there is a little bit of choppiness up here. And we're going to clean that up by removing the background because everything's going to already be laid over on top of that. So going into our table visual right here, I'm going to pull up the table. And what we're going to do is we're going to add product to this. This will be focusing on looking at the sales and profit for our product. We are going to do total sales, total profit, and profit margin percent. Now, let's say that we give this to the CFO and he says, you know, I really don't want to see these decimal numbers right here at the cents. I would rather these be formatted so that I could just simply look at the whole numbers. So what we can do is we can kind of double click here. And then what we can do is remove the decimal places. And we can do that for both the total sales and total profit right here. And there we go. Now that we have our core key visuals, and this is what's really cool, is when you click on things, you can see the report moving dynamically with it. And that's why Power BI is such a wonderful, cool tool, is because when it comes to that 300 seconds of now the executives are wanting to analyze and see in depth where are opportunities we can take, what are things we want to do, we can filter by clicking and analyzing and seeing how everything changes. For example, we just want to look at small business. This is what's happening for small business from 2013 Q3 all the way to 2014 Q4. And it helps people to be able to identify opportunities that they can take and make data-driven decisions. So next we are going to make our text box up here before we go into the fun part of slicers. So I'm going to drag my text box over here. And what we're going to do is label this. I'm going to make the font at about 28. We're going to call this Financials Report 2014. One thing that I think is important to mention is usually when we come to the color schemes of our visualizations, a lot of companies love having their color schemes. Like if a company has blue and orange, typically they like to use blue and orange. One other thing to keep in mind that is kind of not typically thought of, but colorblind people are out there. It is a population. Red and green color blindness is typically the most common. Online, you can find some tools that you can generate colors that work well with so many types of colorblindness, because it's not just green and blue. There are a lot more out there. So that is one thing to keep in mind when building your visualizations, is how colorblind friendly are these reports? Because if colors are going to look too similar, people will not be able to kind of understand the difference between the two. It'll be very hard for them to kind of try to understand what exactly the big picture is that's trying to be presented. So what we're going to do is we're going to color this background right here, this text box. Hang on, where did my title go? There it is. We'll drag it up here. Okay, so I am using the colors dark blue today. I'm trying to stick mostly in the blue range when it comes to my report today. So The colors I'm going to do is 094780 for a very pretty kind of navy dark blue. And then I'm going to format this size to be 28 when I'm typing. I'm going to put back my financials, port 2014, and I'm going to make the text white. And there we go. Belinda, before we move on to slicers, is there anything else you would like to kind of add on when it comes to visualizations for reports?
No, I'm so proud that you mentioned the color blindness. Is the numbers I see are like 1 in 11 men are colorblind, 1 in 200 and something women. So it affects a lot of people, and a lot of people don't even know they're colorblind. So the last thing we want to do is give a pie chart that's one big gray circle that that yields nothing. But no, I think
Exactly.
you hit on some amazing topics and amazing points, and there's formatting you can do. You could see some of the formatting that Jill's doing now to add to it. Branding for your company does invoke confidence, but there's additional formatting that you could do as well. So like on the table, you could do conditional formatting so that you have, if it's over a certain percent, the background's green or yellow or whatever color you want it to be, or icons. So there's a lot of power in it. And you could even use the DAX we talked about earlier in a lot of visuals for conditional formatting as well. So excellent job. Bravo.
Thank you very much, Belinda. I really appreciate that. Now, next, what we are going to be moving on to is our slicers for this report. So we are going to build our year slicer and our segment slicer. This is kind of my favorite part when it comes to building Power BI reports and dashboards, is because the slicer makes everything move so dynamically. And this is kind of where a lot of the analysis gets to kind of happen for everybody. So I went over here and I clicked this slicer right here, and this is going to be for our year. So I'm going to go into the dim date table. I'm going to grab year right here. And then I do not really want the slider happening right here. What I prefer is buttons. I feel like it's a lot more intuitive. So what I'm going to do is the vertical list. And then this is where the cool stuff happens. You can click here to just see 2013 quarter 3 through 4. The charts change, or I can just see 2014. And if I unclick, you can show both of them together. Or if I click them both together while holding control, it'll show them both. So that is the really cool, exciting thing about slicers. The next slicer we're going to do is for our customer segments before we start formatting them. So I'm going to do my customer segment slicer, and I am going to add in on the dimension segment. And I don't even have to just click the add data. I can even drag and drop, which is really cool. Kind of like what I was talking about earlier. There's so many buttons and opportunities in Power BI. You can get lost for sure because it is a learning curve. Power BI can be really tricky, but it is really cool that there are so many different ways to navigate to different things. So now that we have basically pretty much everything laid out, we are going to remove the background image and format as needed to try to make it cleaner. So when we go to format canvas, we are going to click this X right here. And now it looks very white, which can be very hard to distinguish what is exactly happening. But if we go into here, and if we click more colors, if I were to put in F5, 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 we get a nice little light gray that kind of helps distinguish everything, seeing the white, seeing how it kind of pops. I kind of think that it would look a little better, slightly darker. So I'm going to darken it a little bit. We're going to actually do this one right here. That's going to be fine. So there we go. So today we learned how to build a dashboard through walking through importing our data from Excel into Power Query. We walked through the data modeling process after we are done cleaning up in Power Query. We walked through how to build DAX measures, and we walked through how to build a beautiful dashboard like this. So now what I can do is if I hold control, I can compare government, and we can see that pops up right here. to mid-market or to small business, or I can compare more than just two things. And the chart will move as needed to show your data. Belinda, is there anything else you would kind of like to add in this workshop?
There is. Let's do a piece where we put it together. So I just gave you a script I use a lot, a DAX script. And I'm
Thank
looking
you.
at the title that says Financial Report 2014. So if you have just 2013 selected, do you really want that to say 2014? Probably not.
True.
So
Probably not.
let's first create a DAX a DAX calculation. We'll create a measure. So let's put it in the date table. So let's select the date table, although it could go anywhere. And then let's create that new measure. And you could just paste this code in. And this code, it's set up using variables, so it will get, oh, actually,
I'll have to edit that a little bit out. That's all right.
yeah. Actually, you know what? If you put in dot date at the end of that, maybe, oh, I forgot dim. That's it. Yeah, put the dim in there. Yeah, okay. And then on the other, the one on the top too. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, and then
No worries.
yeah, okay, and go ahead and commit that. So what that does is it'll just create a range that has like the start date that's being viewed and the end date that's being viewed. Now let's go back to our report and let's see how we can use this right on the report. On the title visual, get rid of 2014. Okay, and then now when you have that selected, you've got this this pop-up window. It's appearing to the left of it, and one of the options is value. And if you click on value, there. Oh, click a space
Hang on
first.
a second.
Okay.
Do I click a space like
Yeah.
this? No.
Yep, that's good. And then now click on values in the little pane there. Okay, and now type in the word date range, which is the name of our measure. We're calling on the date range. And then to the right of that, in that date range, there is a, no, in the pop-up window, there is an arrow. Click on the arrow to commit it or press the tab key. And now you can see the date range that will appear. This is a dynamic date range. Okay,
Oh,
so let's go ahead and click on save. Okay, and now let's
I can
highlight that and
enlarge
make
this.
that, yeah, you can enlarge it and change the font to match. And so proud that you changed the font colors. You have to highlight it first. It's a bit annoying. Yeah,
Here, save.
yeah, there you go. Okay.
All
Oh,
right. All
yeah,
right,
you
we're
might
gonna go
want to
ahead and
make
format
that,
this.
yeah, let's make the date part a little smaller. Yeah,
All
you
right.
could just do the
Highlight.
date.
Here,
Yeah.
save.
Uh-huh.
Ah, it just keeps wanting to put that up.
I know,
There we
right? Oh,
go.
that's all one field.
That's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, so
So
let's
we
make
can
that.
probably, let's see what it looks like at 20. That
There
looks
you go.
good. What do you
Yeah,
think?
that does look good. Okay,
That looks
so
a lot better.
yeah, now click on save in that pop-up window, and then now click on the date 2013.
Oh,
And so it'll dynamically change. Oh, I guess that one was a little bit bigger because we had the 0 in front of it. But
oh, but yeah, I see the 2013 that changed. How
yes.
cool is that?
So now you have using DAX in an even more efficient way where you're changing your title because you want your title to be explanatory, not just descriptive. So this is will explain when you're just looking at 2013 that you're only looking at 2013. If you're only looking at 2014, you're only looking at 2014. So now even your title is interactive along with everything else. But this is a beautiful report. And very powerful, and it could help a lot of executives.
Thank you so much, Belinda. You
Yeah.
taught me something today. That is one of the coolest things I've ever seen is seeing the text box being able to also change through DAX.
Yeah,
So thank
you'll
you so
notice
much for that. I
you'll
really
notice that
appreciate that.
yeah, it has a blue underline there, and that is
Yes.
a visual indicator that that's a dynamic value. Yep.
Okay, got you. Let's see if I save this.
Uh-huh.
All right, wait, select the format of the value.
Oh, yeah,
No, I think we're good
you don't need
there.
to format it. It's only text, so just click save.
Save.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, highlight that again. You would change it the same way you format the text because that's text field now. So
Yep. So like
yeah,
we would go here,
exactly.
20.
Yep. And now save.
It goes right back.
Oh, it does. Okay. try it one more time. And
If we clicked cancel for any reason,
yeah, go ahead, cancel. See if that does the trick. Yeah,
there we
okay.
go.
Normally I highlight the
Interesting.
whole field and do that, but yeah, okay. Yeah, very cool, isn't it?
Yeah, this was so fun. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Belinda.
yeah. I learned something this morning from somebody else, so happy to share, to pass along the favor.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. And that's the real beautiful thing of the Power Platform is things are always changing all the time. So there's always going to be people out there who are going to help support you and people who are always going to know more than you, just like Belinda. She has 10 years more of experience than me. And today I just learned something from her. So thank you so much, Belinda. So that concludes the end of the workshop. This is time for our little Q&A section if anybody has any questions. No questions today?
No questions, just a lot to absorb, but it's cool. And
Yeah.
I mean everything you did, I was like, damn, I mean, that's pretty impressive. I just
Well, thank
really
you.
have
Well,
to get into it.
yeah, exactly. It's a hands-on type of thing and you jump into it. I think definitely the easiest way to get into it is through community support as well. And I think Belinda can also vouch for that too.
How did you guys get started? Like what was the catalyst for your getting started doing this?
You know what? It's kind of interesting. So when I started in college, I wanted to be a nurse. And later I learned I actually don't want to study the human brain. I want to study the brain of business. So that's kind of actually what really sparked it for me. I come from family of people who are software developers themselves, and
Yeah.
I was told start with the Power Platform, dive into it, and being pursuing a degree in management information systems, we cover a lot about data analysis. So we use a lot of Power BI. So I jumped into Power BI with a mix of a lot of push, and this is the right direction of kind of where business plus software technology is kind of like coming together
Yeah.
and shaking hands and speaking the same language. So that's what got me really into Power BI. I think I was most intimidated at first if I would have to learn a ton of programming. And really, I mean, it is a low code software, so you do use some DAX in certain scenarios, but I think really the best, I mean, like for me, I just watched videos after videos after videos on YouTube. There's
Yeah.
a lot of content creators out there. April Dunham, and she's like one of my favorite out there. She's really good. There's a lot of ways to really get into this, and I must say, nothing beats watching even just short tutorials of certain sections. Community support, if you can get any. Sean runs WPP. Thank you, Sean, for building such a wonderful community. I'm excited seeing where it's growing. And Belinda has her own Power BI group as well, which is really cool. So when I walked
Mm.
into Belinda's group, I was like, this is so cool. But oh my goodness, everybody's done this for years. I think the most intimidating part of it is when you first start, you realize so many people have been in the world of Microsoft for so long,
Right.
and for me, that was what made me really scared at first, but it's so cool because instead of people, I mean, of course there are going to be the people out there who are going to be a little bit negative, like, oh, you don't know much. Fortunately, I've not run into a lot of people like that, fortunately. Instead, what people really do is they celebrate the successes that you've done for how far you've come today. That's kind of what it
Yeah.
is.
I'm very impressed by what you were able to. I mean, I think it's huge. I mean, Sean and I have had these conversations, having worked with the software as long as I have, I understand the table relationships, and I worked with Access way back in the day, and some of that kind of looked like the old Access, when you link the tables. but I've just,
Mhm.
now it's a matter of understanding how to, like you're saying, the DAX and putting it together in this more modern power apps environment. So I'm still a little intimidated, but at the same time, it's like, man,
Of course.
I'd love to have a project where I could just say, all right, let me figure this out. And that may be the best way to do it.
Yeah, that honestly is kind of the best way to do it. And the nice thing is, online you can look at some resources like GitHub. Microsoft themselves provides like sample data you can load into Power BI and play with.
Yeah.
I like loading it from when I started, I liked loading it from Excel rather than like you'll see people can load it from SQL servers and stuff like that because
Yeah.
I was just very much like, I don't have SQL knowledge yet. I would like to jump in with Excel, which is something I'm familiar with. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So, because for me, I was like, I don't know how to connect a SQL Server database. You know what I mean? So I think honestly, trying to make it as simple as possible and remembering kind of the foundation principles of kind of like what Belinda said with the Power Query of the goal of Power Query is to make your data as compact as possible. It'll make your report load go faster, save on storage. And when it comes to things like, the data modeling, keeping things organized, hiding the columns so you don't make a mistake later that you don't really know what happens. Because that's a common thing for even me when you first start off is, and it still happens to me of like, what happened? What did I do? You know what I mean? When I practice,
Oh,
I'll be
yeah.
like, what did I do? you know? And then the visualization section, trying to remember how would somebody, like in this case, we did a financial report, what are the first numbers a CFO would probably want to see? And I'm not a CFO, but I can get a general idea of okay, they um, they know they want to see what sales look like, what profit look like. Those are like the two big things, and some
Right.
accounting principles there.
Right.
But
Number
yeah,
one
so
is cash in the bank. I implemented accounting software for many years, and I never went in a company that someone did not want to know every morning how much cash was in the bank. Mary and Sean will back me up on that.
Yeah. It always scares
yeah.
me when I'm working with clients who have no idea what, yeah. Because
How
we
much
bump into
cash do
that
you have in the
Exactly.
bank?
And
Yeah.
what I think also helps is in this community, people come from various different backgrounds. You'll see the people who came from computer science, and you'll see the people who came from accounting or business. And
Right.
it's cool because I've been able to learn a lot more by talking with people who have those
Yeah.
backgrounds where they're like, well, actually, what I would prefer to see is this layout. You know what I mean? In my lens. And because of that, a lot of my electives and my education have been very accounting focused and very like operations management focused for things when it comes to like supply chain or warehousing, like those types of things. I think that's the coolest thing about this world of the Microsoft Power Platform is you learn so much by not just practicing, but by talking to people as well.
Oh,
So
totally.
you learn so,
Totally.
so much. Hmm.
Yeah, you're going to go far with this. I can tell you that already. You
Thank
really
you.
are.
That's the goal. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
trying to put in the blood, sweat, and tears for it. I mean, no bleeding except for when I decide to bite my nails because that's a bad habit. But
Oh, wow. Have you guys ever been challenged with a report you that you couldn't do, or that it was just, or has that never happened?
Belinda, do you
No,
want to answer this question first?
yeah. So there have been a couple different scenarios. So one, somebody's wanting something where there's not an out of the box visual, so you have to go to a paid visual, an ISV visualization to make it happen. For the most part, you can make anything happen. If someone has really large data sets and they're uh, some of the relationships they want to create are complicated and weird, that would be another thing. But
Yeah.
typically, I mean, it's true. So my background's like yours, Mary, ERP implementation. So uh, anything that you can do that you can say, hey, we're going to if pretend I'm a temper person, and you'd have to explain to me what it is you want me to do, and I will emulate that over and over again to give you the results you need, then it's something that typically you can do. But when the things like in the relationships, I try to keep what I was bringing up, because in an hour you can only do so much. There's a full lot of training that you can take on this. But when you're creating relationships, if you create many to many relationships, you have to be very skilled at what you're doing, and you have to control who could use the reports. Otherwise, people could end up or build reports, because people could end up with results that, although for the way the data was modeled are technically correct, the answer's still wrong. And so you could end up with some things like that. But for the most part, I would say, as long as the data is in good shape, you can usually get what you want to get. I think the only thing that I ever gave up on was in building a financial statement inside of Power BI, trying to get a favorable or unfavorable budget variation to actual. And for those who don't understand financials, what I mean on that is, if you budget that you're going to have $100 in sales and you have $150, then you're $50 to the good. So that's favorable. You would take sales minus budget to see where you are, whether you're in the hole. But for expenses, you would take budget minus actual to get that variation. So if you spent $100, or if you have a budget of $100 expense and you only spend 75, you're $25 to the good. So you do budget minus actual. But in sales, it's the other way around, actual minus budget. So getting that formula to calculate is a bit complex.
Yeah.
So in the time I had allotted by the client, they opted to say, oh yeah, we want to keep costs down, we'll just deal. And so we just put a note on the report itself that explained that. But I think that was the only time, and a couple of the ISVs that have financial products told me that they could solve that. I just never tried it again, but that's it in all the time I've worked on something
Yeah.
that I could
Yeah.
think of.
Yeah, many-to-many relationships are really complicated. Even when you try to set a many-to-many relationship in Power BI, it will warn you, like, are you sure this is what you want to do? And it can make, at least from what my understanding is, and Belinda can probably add more onto this, and I'll show you on my screen what I mean by this. But a many-to-many relationship, it's really difficult, because then when you're pulling up something like sales or something like that, and you want to show like the numbers, Power BI kind of doesn't really know which table to get to. So like, for example, I'm trying to set the many to many, and it's warning me like, hey, this is probably not what you want to do. And if I applied the changes, this is what a many to many looks like. And sometimes Power BI will auto generate it. Sometimes when I load data in, that's typically, from my experience, means there's duplicate values. So Power BI gets a little bit confused with how the filtering should work, because when you're building relationships and using your DAX, that's where the core center of all the filtering and dynamic changes are kind of like stored in your report on the back end.
Yeah. I need to get into this and just start doing it.
Exactly. And what
Yep.
Jill just showed is not unique to Power BI. It's just the way a many-to-many relationship works. So
Right.
my
Mhm.
my recommendation is always start with either many to one to many, depending on what's on the left. If you have one to one, maybe you can consider merging that into one single table, because that
Yeah.
would be easier. But just do what you can to avoid many to many.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. It's a conversation we have a
Mhm.
lot with clients too. You
Yep.
know, when they want to add a field, you know,
Yep.
it's like you can't do that, right? So
Mhm. And Sean's heard me talk about these things hundreds of times.
yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
That was
Yeah.
an excellent job, Jill, and that was a
Yes.
really great report. So bravo, my
Oh,
friend.
thank
Yeah.
you
Bravo.
so much,
Yeah.
everybody. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. I was, I was a little bit nervous preparing for this workshop, but I woke up today and I was like, all the work has been done. You just show up, you go through it, you put in the dry runs, you put in the work, you're ready to go. You're all set. So, and I really appreciate you for showing up for me, Belinda, for being my big support. And thank you, Sean, for supporting me as well. Really appreciate it. I mean,
Yeah.
like, yes, could I have probably done this, without you guys? Absolutely. Could I have done it as well today? No, I couldn't
Yeah.
have. I couldn't have. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you. So Sean and Belinda have been some of my greatest teachers here when I've been learning the Power Platform. Those two are some of my most powerful, wonderful connections. And
Aw.
that's the beauty of the Power Platform when you explore and you build connections by just showing up and putting in the work.
Yeah.
People like Sean and Belinda come around and say, "Hey, let me give you a hand on, learning all these tools." So thank you very much, you guys.
Oh,
Yeah, you're
that's
literally
good.
making me tear up. I think Sean is
Oh.
too.
Oh my goodness.
Okay,
Yeah,
crying
I
time's
get a
over.
little teary. So thank you so much. Thank you.
You're
This
muted,
was
Sean. We
really
missed that.
fun.
I can't hear
Uh-oh.
you at all.
Sean?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh no. Sean went mute.
Ah.
All right.
Well, thanks
Bye.
so
Thank
much. It
you
was
all.
really great to meet you guys. I
Yes.
appreciate
It
it.
was wonderful to meet you all. Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much.
you.
Take
Thanks.
care,
Had a
you
great time.
guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.